Imagine walking into a cave. There's a scorch mark on the floor, the same spot, but not from one generation, from hundreds of them. Your ancestors slept in that cave. So did their ancestors, and theirs before them. For tens of thousands of years, humans kept returning to the same place, to sleep, to shelter, to raise children. You might think that means they passed something down, a memory of the place, a way of surviving there, knowledge accumulating, generation after generation, growing richer. But that's not what actually happened.
They forgot, over and over, and they never knew they'd forgotten. Let's start at Border Cave, on the border of South Africa and Eswatini. It holds one of the longest continuous records of human habitation ever found. Layer after layer of sediment shows people sleeping, cooking, and dying there for over 200,000 years. 200,000 years. Not from one unbroken lineage, but from wave after wave of humans arriving and leaving.
Archaeologists have a term for places like this. They call them persistent places, locations reused across generations, sometimes with thousands of years of complete abandonment in between. And the reason they got reused turns out to be strikingly simple. Not because anyone remembered, because the landscape forced it. A water source nearby, a cave mouth angled away from the wind, enough elevation to escape seasonal flooding, a rock overhang that stays dry through monsoon season. Any group of humans passing through that territory, thousands of years apart from each other, evaluating the same hills and the same rivers with the same human eyes, would arrive at the same conclusion. This is a good place to sleep. They didn't find the place because they inherited a map from their ancestors. They found it again, from scratch, every time. The geology did the remembering for them. Here's the unsettling part. If the location stayed the same, but every group discovered it independently, that means knowledge of the place was never actually passed down intact. What survived was the geography, not the memory. And if only the geography survived, what happened to everything else they learned? This is where another piece of research comes in. And the answer is even stranger. In 2004, an anthropologist named Joseph Henrich published a study on Tasmania, an island south of Australia. Around 10,000 years ago, when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, Tasmania was cut off from mainland Australia. The people living there became completely isolated. No contact, no trade, no new ideas drifting in from outside. For 10,000 years straight.
Before the separation, they had fairly sophisticated tools. Fishing nets, bone needles for sewing war, layered clothing, multi-pronged fishing spears. Enough technology to survive comfortably in a cold, seasonal climate with real winters. But thousands of years after the isolation, when Europeans finally reached Tasmania in the 18th century, they found something strange. The Tasmanian population no longer had most of those tools. They'd stopped fishing entirely. Even though fish were abundant just offshore, they'd lost the technique for sewing warm clothes and were wearing simple wraps instead. Even through cold winters, several bone tools that appeared in older archaeological layers had vanished completely from more recent ones. They hadn't gotten less intelligent. Their brains were the same as any other human brain on the planet, capable of the same reasoning, the same learning, the same memory. What was lost wasn't intelligence. What was lost was the chain.
Henrich argued that complex knowledge, like net making, multi-step tool construction, or sewing thick weatherproof clothing, was never stored in one head. It was distributed across many minds at once, spread across a population large enough that if one expert forgot a step, someone else remembered it. It survived only as long as the chain of imitation, from teacher to student, generation after generation, stayed unbroken. In small, isolated populations like Tasmania, estimated at only a few thousand people, that chain was fragile. One skilled craftsperson dying suddenly before training an apprentice, and a technique could vanish forever within a single generation. In small populations, this happened more often than we'd assume, not because people forgot on purpose, and not through any single catastrophic event, but because there simply weren't enough people to keep that knowledge alive redundantly, spread across enough minds at once to survive random loss. And this is where the two threads meet. A place can survive for thousands of years because the landscape itself keeps forcing people back to it. But the knowledge of how to live there, how to build the right kind of fire for a particular kind of wood, how to process a specific plant so it isn't toxic, how to survive a specific season's predators, that's far more fragile. It only lasts as long as someone is still alive to teach it, and as long as no gap is long enough to break the chain. The caves remembered better than the people who slept in them. Stone doesn't forget. Layers of ash, layers of bone, layers of discarded tools, all stacked neatly, one on top of the other, like a diary written by time itself, indifferent to whoever is reading it. But the humans who created those layers, they arrived each time as if for the first time, rediscovering fire building and tool-making techniques their own great-grandparents once knew by heart.
And here's the part almost nobody talks about. We like to imagine human history as a straight line climbing upward, each generation inheriting more than the last, knowledge accumulating endlessly toward the modern world, a steady march from stone tools to smartphones. But the archaeological record doesn't show a straight line. It shows a sawtooth, rise, then break, rise again, from a lower point, then break again. Some tools found in older Stone Age layers turn out to be more sophisticated in their craftsmanship than tools from much later layers. At the very same site, certain blade knapping techniques appear, disappear for thousands of years, then reappear independently somewhere else entirely. Not because the people in those later layers were biologically more primitive, but because the teaching chain broke at some point that no stone will ever record. And the survivors had to rebuild from whatever fragments remained, often arriving at cruder solutions than the ones already lost. So if you ask why prehistoric humans slept in the same cave for thousands of years, but kept forgetting how to live there, the answer isn't that they were foolish, and it isn't that they didn't care.
The answer is that place and knowledge obey different laws. A place survives because the earth itself keeps pulling you back to it, offering the same shelter to anyone who knows how to look. Knowledge survives only as long as there's a human voice still saying it out loud, a human hand still practicing it, passed from one person to the next without a gap long enough to snap the thread. And maybe this isn't only a story about the past. Every time a family trade goes untaught to the next generation, every time an old craftsman dies without a student, every time an oral tradition stops being told because no one wants to sit still long enough to listen anymore, the same mechanism is quietly at work. Not in a cave, in a living room, a workshop, a kitchen, a language spoken by fewer people every year.
The place will still be there. The house, the land, the shop will still stand. But the knowledge that once filled it can disappear in a single generation, without a sound, without a warning, without anyone realizing what's gone, until someone goes looking for it and finds nothing.
The stone will always remember that you were there. It will never remember what you knew. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe and let's keep digging.